New year, fresh start, time to recreate myself. What will I find when I walk down this path? New friends, new goals, new challenges to be met. I will meet them and I am going to succeed. New year, fresh start, it's time for self-discovery.
Episode 17. Intrigue Thickens. The warm sunlight gently caressed Noah's face, and the embrace was so lovely that he closed his eyes. Noah stood beneath one of the trees outside of the buildings, and several clusters of students were eating lunch within his sight. For a brief moment, his mind blanked, and he only existed in that moment, basking in the sun. There was no Noah Cruz. There was no Marzo the Archangel. There wasn't even really a man. Only pleasure and peace, even as Noah floated amidst the pureness of the sunlight. Grim flickers danced on the edges of the warmth's radius. They poked at Noah, and he couldn't resist slipping out of his momentary reprieve. Somewhere, perhaps even in the city of Laughin, someone made dark and terrible plots. Those plots would close in on him soon, especially since he had stopped running. He had been running for decades. But did he ever really think he had escaped? No. Not even once did he ever give himself that false notion. Noah could never escape the weight of his treachery, the brutal legacy of his people, or the faces of those he had a hand in killing.
Mr. Cruz?
Noah opened his eyes and then jumped back ever so slightly. Diane stood in front of him, within 6 feet, and she clasped her hands behind her back. She frowned at him, and her eyes met his own. A strange familiarity sparkled within them, although he couldn't exactly place why she appeared so familiar.
Yes. Mrs. Scontes, is everything all right?
For a brief moment, Diane just watched him, much like how a cat stared at a strange new toy right before she pounced. Diane gave the most subtle wince, and then she averted her eyes.
I was wondering if I could ask you some questions.
Well, certainly. What can I answer for you?
Noah stood up off of the tree. He and Miss Escantes were alone in the area, and the cluster of students must have drifted off somewhere else.
I was just curious about you, sir. I am not accustomed to meeting Mageblood teachers who know the Heliotian languages so well. I am interested in your background. What led you to wanting to be an expert in them?
Noah's heart thumped faster in his chest, and his stomach started vibrating wildly.
Well, aside from demons and devils, most people don't speak either of the Heliotian languages, much less both. In my younger days, I saw there was a chance to establish a niche, and so I started mastering them.
Diane crossed her arms over her chest, as if hugging herself, her brow furrowed.
But most Mageblood families hate demons, devils, and anyone else who is not a pure human. In fact, none of the other faculty who aren't Heliotian speak any of the languages with any sense of competence. No offense, sir, but you are quite strange.
I've always been a unique individual, so no offense is taken. I'm just passionate about languages is all. I'm kind of a nerd.
A brief silence saturated the air, and Diane started thumbing a silver ring that was on her right hand. The ring was a simple band without any sort of additional carving or ornamentation. When Diane noticed that Noah had noticed it, she placed her hands behind her back.
I don't know why you'd want to study either of the Heliotian languages. They're mongrel languages for a mongrel people.
Now, Mrs. Scontes, that sort of talk is uncalled for. You may be a purist, but you have no right to disrespect other people because they're different than you.
Purist? Mr. Cruz, I'm not trying to be offensive to you. I just think that the Heliotians are terrible people. They're all murderers and evil monsters. It's all their fault that...
Diane stopped herself as her eyes went wide for a moment.
Their fault at what?
Diane winced and twisted before him. When she didn't say anything, Noah leaned back against the tree, and he reviewed the young woman before him. She stood with her shoulders slumped slightly, and her hands were at her side again. Diane didn't look directly at Noah, and she kept averting her eyes, which radiated with uncertainty.
So, all Helosians are bad? Does that include Seto?
Diane's eyes widened, and she peered up at Noah.
No, Seto is different.
Different? How so? He is a Helosian. He's a demon.
Diane wilted a little more.
Seto is my friend.
Noah crossed his arms over his chest.
But you just said that Helosians are mongrels. A mongrel people.
Well, yeah, I said that, but Seto isn't. The Helosians who came before him, though, they're the bad ones. They're the ones who destroyed my family.
Noah stared wide-eyed at the young woman, and within seconds, Diane started to cry a little. She stepped back away from him, wiped her face on her sleeve, and then gave him a deep bow.
Please forgive me, Mr. Cruz. I shouldn't have said anything. Can you please forget this? Can you please not tell Seto or Kachina I said any of this? They really like you, and I could—
Noah held up a hand.
I promise I won't say anything. But there is something I want you to think about.
Diane took another step back, but she brought her arms close to her chest.
Yes?
You said the Helosians who came before destroyed your family.
Diane winced and averted her eyes.
I'm sorry that you had to go through something like that. I'm not going to force you to talk about it. But I want to let you know that you can come and talk to me about it if you ever do. There will be no judgments, no punishments, or anything like that, okay? Beyond that, though, I want you to understand that not all Helosians are evil, cruel, or murderous. Seto is a great example of how amazing demons can be. Just like every race of people, there can be good ones and bad ones. I've known from personal experience that holding on to hate for a certain kind of race or races, just because they've wronged you, will only hold you back from healing.
For a long moment, Diane just locked gazes with Noah.
You're right, Mr. Cruz. Thank you for listening to me. You have an interesting perspective on things.
The lunch bell rang, and Diane turned around to leave. Noah simply watched her. A great billowing had appeared in his chest, and every single nerve ending flared with caution. His mind also buzzed, and yet Noah couldn't quite identify why. He was incredibly shifted in his inner sense of balance. For the rest of the day, Noah went about with his usual routine. He gave the best instruction he could. No one gave him any issues. And for the most part, it was actually a pretty good day. Nevertheless, a lump had formed in the back of his mind. It pulsated continuously, and the more attention that Noah gave the lump, the larger it grew. After school, Noah was notified he was unneeded for any additional activities, and so he was free to venture home. It was a beautiful day. The sky was clear, the temperature was divine, and there weren't a lot of people walking on the streets yet. He tried to keep his mind clear of any of the unsettling nuances of the recent events, and yet whenever he let his mind relax, the same dark concerns that troubled him earlier returned. Within the cluster of thoughts, images of the young Miss Escantes appeared in the forefront of his imagination. What could have happened to that poor child that caused her to hate the Helosians so zealously? And what did she mean about how they destroyed her family? The implications were ominous and vague. Noah rounded a corner, but something caught his eye. A certain dark-haired Arceados Academy student had been walking in the same direction as him. He didn't actually turn his head to inspect her, but as Diane's image had been flashing in his mind's eye, she was easy to identify. Noah's heart thumped harder, and cold spasms slithered throughout his veins like icy water. He moved a little faster and then ducked into the first alleyway he could. If he timed his pace right, then Diane should have only just rounded the corner. Noah crouched down behind a dumpster sitting in an alley, and he peeked just a little beyond it. The moisture in his mouth disappeared, and yet he dared not splosh his tongue with spit. He waited and watched. Perhaps he had been mistaken. Perhaps it was just another student. Or maybe Diane was going another way. Noah peeked around him to ensure that she had not somehow snuck around him. When he turned back around, his eyes widened a little, and he shifted a little more behind the dumpster. Diane stood in the mouth of the alley, and she looked around frantically. Noah's breath came out ever so softly, and he took great care with drawing in breath. Diane's face contorted a little, and she bit the bottom of her lip nervously. She pulled out a cell phone, and then let her fingers dance across the surface. Noah just sat behind the dumpster's form, completely obscured, and he just listened. She let out a dissatisfied grunt and then started talking.
Hello? I'm really sorry, but I lost him. I know, I'm really sorry. I'll try again tomorrow. Yes, ma'am, I understand.
Feet shuffled a little, and then everything became relatively quiet. Had she just walked away? Noah sat there for a few moments before he eased back around and peeked out from behind the dumpster. No one was there, and yet Noah's stomach still irradiated with vengeance. He waited there for a few more minutes and then got to his feet. Noah peeked out, but didn't see Diane or anyone else watching out for him. Rather than emerge from the alley, Noah walked to the other end and started walking down new streets, taking random turns and twists when he felt inclined. When he got home, he found Samuel lounging on his couch.
About time, motherfucker. Shit. I was wondering why your ass was taking your sweet time.
I think we have a problem.